Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 14th of August. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 537 of the illegal Russian war of aggression, and then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then together we will take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. 7 people, including a 23-day-old girl, were killed by Russian shelling in the Kherson region on Sunday, Ukraine's Internal Affairs Ministry has said. An attack on the village of Shiroka Balka killed 4 members of the same family, including their young baby and another resident. 2 men were killed in the neighbouring village of Stanislav. Vladimir Zelensky promised justice for the attacks on Kherson. There is no day when Russian evil does not receive our entirely just response, he said in his Sunday night video address, adding, "We will not leave any of Russia's crimes unanswered." A Russian warship fired warning shots at a cargo ship in the southwestern Black Sea, the first time Russia has fired on a merchant ship since exiting the UN-brokered grain deal last month. Russia said in a statement that its Vasily Baikov patrol ship fired automatic weapons on the Palau-flagged Sukru Okan vessel. The merchant vessel is reported to have continued on its course without stopping. 3 civilians were injured in the Kursk region from shells coming over the Ukrainian border, according to Roman Starovoyt, the regional governor. Ukrainian forces were trying to pierce Russian lines in the western parts of Donetsk region, a Russian-installed official has said. Vladimir Rogov said that there had been intense fighting down the Velika Novosilka as Ukrainian troops try to push down to the coast on the Sea of Azov. The governor of the Russian region of Belgorod blamed a Ukrainian drone for damage to an apartment building on Sunday, after Russia's defense ministry said air defenses shot down at least 4 Ukrainian drones close to the border. Germany will deliver a Luna new generation drone system to Ukraine. The equipment will include a ground control station with several drones, a launch catapult, and military trucks. And Ukraine has become the most heavily mined country on earth after a year and a half of Russian troops laying them down. Soldiers have been unearthing 5 mines for every square metre in some places, according to the Ukrainian Defence Minister, Alexei Reznikov. Now, we are lucky enough to be joined this evening by Maureen Watt. Maureen is a retired politician and a former Minister for Mental Health in the Scottish Government. Maureen served as a regional MSP for North East Scotland from 2006 until 2011 and was then the member of our Scottish Parliament representing the constituency of Aberdeen South and North Kincardine from 2011 until 2021 when she retired. Maureen has also been a teacher and a counsellor amongst many other roles. Maureen, good evening. How are you keeping?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, we've had a nice sunny day here. It was getting too hot actually to do hard work in the garden, but a nice day. My daughter's also home from Paris, so all good.
Brilliant, and it's yes, a nice problem to have if it's a little warm to be working in the garden today. Glad to hear it.
Mhm.
Our first story this evening is in a visit to Edinburgh today. Sir Keir Starmer made it clear that he was the one doing the talking. Concerns over party policy expressed by the Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar and the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election candidate Michael Shanks were dismissed by Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer has made several U-turns on Labour policy recently, insisting he will stick to the current Conservative government spending plans if in government at the next election. He has ruled out scrapping the 2-child benefit cap, the rape clause and bedroom tax. The SNP's Rutherglen and Hamilton West candidate Katie Loudon branded the comments from Sir Keir Starmer ludicrous after the Labour leader said anyone looking for division between Scottish and UK Labour would have a very long search. Pointing out objections from senior Scottish Labour figures to Sir Keir Starmer's plans to maintain the abhorrent Tory 2-child cap and rape clause, Loudon said divisions with the party were glaringly obvious. The Scottish Greens said that Sir Keir Starmer is showing complete contempt for Scotland and has a severe case of Westminsteritis, accusing him of shutting down dissent from Scottish Labour figures. Commenting, Katie Loudon said, "It only takes seconds to find the glaringly obvious divisions between Starmer and his Scottish branch office. It is ludicrous to suggest otherwise." Some Scottish Labour figures have come out in strong opposition to Starmer's pro-austerity and pro-two-child cap policies, but their appeals have repeatedly fallen on deaf ears, proving that Anna Sarwar has no real influence. She went on, and strong words from senior Scottish Labour figures mean nothing while their MPs and candidates gleefully sign up to voting through Starmer's Tory replica agenda in the House of Commons. The views of the branch office are clearly secondary to Keir Starmer's desire to prop up the Tories' punishing welfare agenda and damaging Brexit. So, Maureen, firstly, Sir Keir Starmer said that anybody who's trying to find division is going to have a very, very long search. Now, it struck me that that's not a denial. In a sense, it's an admission that there is division there, but it's just kept very well hidden away from voters. Is that fair to say?
Well, I don't think it's even hidden, to be honest. I mean, we know that Monica Lennon, for example, a prominent member of the Labour Party in Scotland, has said that she is against this two-child cap, as have others. It's interesting that Anna Sarwar is nowhere to be seen at the moment. Okay, I don't deny anybody a holiday, but he seems to have been away for quite a while, and Jackie Bailey has been brought in to be fronting any comments for the Labour Party in Scotland. But there clearly is a divide, and I suspect that the Labour Party are getting quite worried that this is now, excuse me, going to be quite a prominent topic or for debate in the by-election in Rutherglen and Hamilton West. So there is clearly division. I think, or I hope that more and more people are saying to themselves, well, if Keir Starmer is going to stick to Tory government spending plans, why would we change? When in fact people are crying out for a radical change in order to sort out the mess that the UK's economy is in post-COVID, and more importantly, post-Brexit, and post, of course, Liz Truss's trashing of the economy. So I think the Labour Party are maybe stuck in a bit of a rut at the moment, and we'll just see what happens for the rest of the summer. And when they go back to Westminster, I think is at the beginning of October.
I think that's right, Maureen. I think it is the beginning of October. We're expecting Parliament to begin sitting again. The other aspect in terms of Scottish politics I wanted to talk to you about was: do you think is the two-child cap, bedroom tax, austerity supporting, Brexit supporting, no freedom of movement, democracy denying, not taxing the rich, anti-refugee rhetoric that we're hearing now from Starmer and from British Labour leadership, do you think is that having any impact in the minds of Scottish voters?
Well, I haven't found it, I don't live in the central belt, but I haven't found that there is a big swing to Labour when I've been out knocking doors, which I do most weeks. And from what I've gleaned from speaking to people who have been to Rutherglen, they're not finding it either. So I just wonder if the hype of the mainstream media saying that the Labour Party are doing really well in the Central Belt is in fact true or not. Of course, the Hamilton by-election will show us, and clearly it is going to be a very big test for the SNP and for Labour. But I think the rhetoric that had been coming from the mainstream media and London-based Labour was complete overhype. And I just wonder if they're beginning to see that this line, which I presume they will have tested with focus groups and all that, that's what political parties do now, is in fact something that resonates in Scotland as much as they think it probably does. And the red wall seats, the former Labour seats that fell so dramatically to the Tories in 2019. So I think this next election, which can't come soon enough, is going to be really pivotal. I think in how the UK Westminster goes forward, and Scotland, whether it's still very different, as I think I detect in people that I speak to.
Thanks, Maureen. I suspect that you and I will be discussing that topic again, as you say, as the summer moves on and as we get to the Rotherham by-election in later on in the year. Let's move on and look at our next story now, because independent analysis commissioned by the SNP has found that statutory sick pay, SSP, in the UK has been cut by almost a tenth in real terms since the Tories came to power. In 2009, 2010, sick pay would have had the equivalent of £120 and a penny a week, and that's expressed in 2023-24 prices, whereas the actual rate of sick pay today is only £109.40 a week, a reduction of more than £10. As a result, someone reliant on sick pay for a maximum 28 weeks would find themselves almost £300 worse off than they would have been in 2010. The research shows UK sick pay is significantly worse than other countries in Northwest Europe. The UK is the only country that sets a low flat rate for employer-paid statutory sick pay, and ONS data shows the current UK rate of £109.40 a week is worth 18% of average weekly gross pay in the UK, which is currently £607. In contrast, Switzerland, Norway, Austria, Luxembourg, Germany and Belgium, employees there get 100% of full wages for a period of months or years. In Switzerland, it's up to 2 years. In Norway, it's a year. In Austria, it's up to 12 weeks. In Luxembourg, it's 11 weeks. And in Germany, it's 6 weeks. In Sweden, you're entitled to 80% of your wage for a year. And in the Netherlands, you're entitled to 70% of your wages for up to 2 years. In most European countries, there is then a further period of paid sick leave covered by state benefits or health insurance schemes. In almost all cases, these schemes are also significantly more generous than the UK. In Germany, after 6 weeks of full pay, employees are entitled to 70% of earnings from health insurance. Commenting, the SNP business spokesperson, Richard Thompson MP, said, "The UK is the sick man of Europe when it comes to the threadbare support Westminster offers to employees who are too ill to work, showing why independence is key to building a fairer, healthier and wealthier future for Scotland." After decades of Tory and Labour Party failure, the UK government has fallen well behind on sick pay. While workers in neighbouring European countries get 100% of their full wages, workers in the UK get little more than £100 a week. It's truly pathetic. He went on, "The COVID pandemic showed what happens when thousands of workers fall through the gaps and don't get the help that they need under Westminster control. But only with independence can Scotland introduce a fairer system like our European neighbours." So, Maureen, the figures that the SNP have published today, which were prepared by the House of Commons Library, I think, show that statutory sick pay is now £109.40, as it is the value of £109.40 a week. That's, what, £15 a day or just over. And it's worth around 18% of average weekly regular gross pay in the UK. So how can anyone who is sick be expected to live on less than £440 a month?
Yeah, it's absolutely appalling. I mean, it's just so shocking. And is this the Tories? You know, we know that they want to make the poor poorer while the rich get richer. But is it the Tories trying to push everybody to take out a sickness insurance so that eventually they think they won't need to have any national scheme? I mean, this is truly appalling. And this benefit is just one of many which shows that the UK is embarrassingly so low on these comparators with other Western European countries on how they deal with their folk when they're either pensioners or, in this case, with sick pay. I mean, when you think also in England that prescriptions are £9 plus, I think, each.
Hmm.
So if you're sick, you more than likely will be needing prescriptions as well, and they're supposed to come out of this paltry £109 a week, as well as, if you're have a mortgage and everything else to pay. What if you're the main breadwinner? We saw during COVID, and as a result of COVID, people are having to sell their houses if they are suffering from long COVID. Seriously, is this the kind of country that in 2023 we want to be living in? I don't think so. And I really do wish that more and more people would just think about the situation that they're in and think that there really is an alternative out there if they just think about it and listen to what the SNP proposes. But I'm increasingly astounded that in the whole of the UK, more and more people aren't taking to the streets to demonstrate against how poorly they're looked after. Maybe they're just waiting to have a landslide defeat of the Tories in the next election. But if Stammer is only promising more of the same, then what alternative do they have in the rest of the UK apart from Scotland?
Thanks, Maureen. Yes, prescription charges in England are £9.65 per item at the moment. But I was actually going to ask you about the point you've just been making. We know that the state pension in the UK is comparatively poor when compared to other Northwest European countries, and we've been reminded today by the SNP that statutory sick pay is poor as well. And I was wondering, at what point do voters realise how badly served they are in comparison to other comparable European nations? And why is it that what is it that means that voters apparently aren't bothered by it?
Well, I think we hear very little about comparing what's happening in the UK with the rest of Europe or indeed the world. I mean, you might get it on Channel 4 News or perhaps Newsnight, but there's very little coverage of international affairs. People talk about the US being very insular and inward looking, and it's a vast country, you can see why. But we're a small country on the edge of Europe, and no longer, of course, part of it. But you know people really need to, as they say, wake up and smell the coffee about just how badly they're doing compared to other countries. And, if you travel abroad, I hope that most people try and find out about what the situation is in the countries that they're going to. And perhaps they'll see that way that people are not so um, badly off as they are in the UK. But yeah, I suppose it's up to parties like the SNP to make that case on the doorsteps with well designed leaflets.
Absolutely, Maureen. Thank you. Now then, we'll look at the cost of living crisis from another perspective now, because the cost of some basic food items, such as cheese, butter, and bread, has soared by more than 30% in the last 2 years, forcing poorer households to make desperate choices between keeping up their bill payments or putting food on the table, campaigners have said. Food price inflation has slowed in recent months, but costs remain much higher than they were 2 years ago, disproportionately affecting low-income households, according to research by the consumer body Which. The annual pace of grocery price growth cooled to 14.9% over the 4 weeks to the 9th of July, and that's down from 16.5% a month earlier, according to the latest analysis by the retail industry data provider Kantar. Despite the slowdown, which figures showed that food prices have risen significantly over the past 2 years, and some products have gone up by more than 30% since 2021. The food products with the highest rates of inflation are milk at more than 36%, cheese at more than 35%, butters and spreads at more than 32%, cakes and cookies at more than 31%, and bakery items at a little over 30%. Vegetable prices are up nearly 20% since May to July 2021. Meat prices are up by more than 23%, and savoury pies, pastries, and quiches are up 26%. Biscuit prices have increased by 27%, and juice drinks and smoothies are up by 28.6%. The Consumer Rights Group is now urging supermarkets to stock their cheapest products in all their convenience store branches, as well as larger outlets, as charities have warned that families are struggling to cope with food inflation. Commenting, the SNP MP Amy Callaghan said, "The UK government must make amends for their cost of living crisis by bringing in real cost of living support. The blame for this crisis lies squarely at their door. 13 years of Tory austerity and the calamitous impact of Brexit has exacerbated this crisis across Scotland." She went on, the pro-Brexit Labour Party is no better. As well as ruling out a return to the EU prosperity, Sir Keir Starmer has now signed up to Tory tax and spending plans and austerity policies. So, Maureen, as I said, which figures show that food prices have risen significantly, and some are up more than 30%, and the food products with the highest rates of inflation are milk, cheese, butters, cakes and cookies, and bakery items. And it struck me, is it any wonder that we're now seeing that young people in the UK are shorter in height than their European cousins, and that Victorian diseases like TB and rickets are starting to appear in our communities again?
I mean, you're asking me these questions, Andrew. I just wish that the broadcasters and the interviewers on the mainstream media would ask these questions of the Tory and Labour politicians whom they do interview on news programmes and Newsnight and Channel 4 and all this, because they get away scot-free and are never asked these really pertinent questions that the ordinary voter wants to hear the answer to, and have they indeed got an answer. But it would be great if more people were able to hear a discussion on these issues, and that our elected politicians at Westminster were held to account on these. It's appalling that we're one of the richest countries in the world, and yet our poorest are suffering, as you say, from Victorian diseases and even affecting the stature of our children. It's absolutely appalling. So there is an alternative to austerity. You know, we were talking about comparisons with other countries. They are not subjecting their citizens and voters to the austerity that the UK under the Tory government is, so that they can fill the coffers of their friends. And we keep coming back to the general election. It really can't come soon enough. And I just hope that voters are not so scunnered and, you know, deflated and feeling downtrodden, that they don't bother to come out and vote. They might say, "Oh, it's not going to make any difference," and of course they're right if they're going to just vote for Keir Starmer. But it just shows you we've got a big job of work in the SNP and pro-independence parties to get that message across, and it has to be on the doorsteps, because mainstream media, I mean, why are they all just kowtowing and taking the line of the Labour and Tory parties? There's no, or very little, critical analysis of what the effects of this austerity are on the citizens of the UK that I've seen. So yeah, it's just an awful situation to be in. And any other European country, I think you would have seen mass demonstrations on the street by now.
Thanks, Maureen. That's a very good point. And there was one other angle on this story I wanted just to touch on briefly with you. Which has welcomed the announcement by Tesco that they will put their cheaper own brand ranges into their convenience stores, which also said that more needs to be done because own brand items are still much more expensive than budget ranges. For example, Tesco's own brand penny pasta is £75 for half a kilo, but the budget penny pasta is only 41 pence for a half kilo. So is it time, do you think, for tighter regulation on the big supermarkets, who, of course, complain that they make low margins, but who are also making bumper profits during the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, trying to regulate the supermarkets. I mean, we've been calling for that for years, but has it worked? It just doesn't work, or is it there's just no appetite for it from the Westminster government? Um, and as you say, they're making huge profits um, post COVID, and as you say, they do say that their margins are tight, but yet they're making these huge profits. But I was thinking, when we first started talking about this item, if you were poor, you used to get um, a butter or spread piece with jelly or jam on it, and yet these items are now the most expensive, or some of the most expensive. So, what do parents and carers feed their children on if these items are so expensive? And as you say, pastas as well. So, yeah, difficult choices. I suppose patties and something nice on it or something. But yeah, it's really difficult. I hate to be in that situation.
No, you're absolutely right, Maureen. Thank you. And actually, we've got another diet story related to the cost of living crisis and also the climate crisis to think about now, because a healthy diet in the UK will be put at risk by climate breakdown as European droughts shrink fresh fruit and vegetable supplies, some experts have said. Fresh produce from the Mediterranean, upon which the UK is reliant, will become more expensive and harder to obtain as extreme heat causes yields to reduce, putting a healthy diet out of reach of the poorest in society, according to a report by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Many foods imported from the Mediterranean at present cannot be grown in the UK for at least parts of the year, or have to be grown indoors using more expensive and energy intensive processes to protect them and heat the growing space. Many cannot be grown for the UK at scale, and the former category includes cauliflowers, broccoli, and strawberries. It also includes nearly two-thirds of the cucumbers and tomatoes imported to the UK, and a fifth of the overall supply of onions. Additionally, more than half of the UK's lemons and sweet peppers come from the Mediterranean, along with two-thirds of all oranges and 40% of table grapes. Olive oil is also affected by extreme temperatures. The UK gets 80% of its supplies from the region. This year has been one of the foodstuffs with the sharpest increases in prices, adding to inflation. According to the report, in 2022, just over a quarter of UK food imports, 9.8 billion kilos worth, or just over £16 billion, came from the Mediterranean, mostly fresh fruit and vegetables. Spain, which is experiencing some of the worst extreme heat and drought, accounted for 7% of UK food imports, worth about £4 billion. Gareth Redmond King, the head of the international programme at the Energy and Crisis Intelligence Unit, said, as well as a climate crisis, we're in a public health crisis too. Most of us already don't eat enough fruit and vegetables, and often healthier diets already tend to cost more. As the impacts of climate change are likely to make the healthy food we should be eating even more expensive, it becomes even less accessible to the poorest in society. Previous analysis by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit found that the climate crisis and fossil fuel prices have added more than £400 to household shopping bills in 2022, increasing the total annual UK food shopping bill by about £11.4 billion. So, Maureen, Gareth Redmond King said that as well as a climate crisis, we're in a public health crisis too, because we already don't eat enough fruit and vegetables, and healthier diets tend to cost more. And as the impact of climate change is likely to make the healthy food we should be eating even more expensive, it becomes less accessible to the poorest in society. Now, you and I were just talking about jelly pieces and bread and butter sandwiches and bread and spread sandwiches. But in terms of the impact on the health of the poorest in our society, is Mr. Redmond King correct when he says that the climate crisis is going to make things even worse?
Yes, and I think we've had a taste of this earlier on this year, didn't we? When Spain experienced a real heat wave earlier on, sort of late spring, early summer, and I think it was around about then. And then, we had no tomatoes on the shelves, no tomatoes today or tomorrow or the next day seems to be the outlook. So um, this is really serious because, as you say, a lot of our healthy produce comes from the Mediterranean. And we saw, for example, the wildfires on Rhodes completely obliterated their olive groves. Now, Rhodes is not a particularly big country, but it did export its olive oil. So if that is replicated throughout the Mediterranean and North Africa, then there are going to be serious shortages. So I think where we can, we should probably be going and picking, if there's any rasps left, which strawberries aren't certainly left, but perhaps black currants or blueberries or things, unfreezing them, because I think it's going to be really serious this winter. And as we talked about earlier, not youngsters not getting the right food does have a serious effect on their growth. And I'm old enough to remember that among my school companions at the time probably didn't recognize as such, but looking back, you can see that was probably the problem. So, yes, as again I say, really this in 2023 in rich Britain.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maureen. Now then, we'll move on because the UK government ministers were not told about the presence of the potentially deadly Legionella bacteria on board the Bibby Stockholm barge until Thursday night, the UK Health Secretary has said. That's 3 days after health protection officials informed Dorset County Council. In an interview on Sky TV, Steve Barclay said he could not say whether Dorset Council had informed Home Office officials earlier about the test results on the vessel, which is to be used to house asylum seekers, but he said that ministers first knew late on Thursday. Asked about the timetable, Barclay told Sky News that the tests for Legionella, which can cause Legionnaire's disease, and that's a severe type of pneumonia, if small droplets of water containing the bacteria are inhaled, he said that the tests were a standard thing. The Home Office did take precautionary measures as soon as we got the results. Ministers found out on Thursday night, is my understanding, he said. Asked why Dorset Council had said it told the Home Office on Monday, the day the test results arrived, Barclay said it may be the Council notified the Home Office. That's an issue for those in the Home Office to respond to. He went on, my understanding from colleagues in the Home Office is that it was notified to Home Office ministers on Thursday, and they then took very quick action as a result. The head of the UK's Health Security Agency, which carried out the tests, confirmed that the results had been passed to the Council on Monday, a week ago. The first asylum seekers were moved on to the barge that day, only for all 39 to be taken off again on Thursday and Friday last week. Because it was detected in a structure rather than in a person, it was for the Council to lead on, she said. Dorset Council has confirmed that it had raised the alarm about Legionella with the Home Office contractors on the same day it received the test results. It's unclear when the contractors told the Home Office about the results. Carolyn Parks, a Portland councillor who is pursuing legal action against the Home Office about the barge in a personal capacity, questioned the delay in evacuating people from the vessel. So, Maureen, firstly, I'm pretty sure you and I have spoken about the Home Office before on Broadcasting Scotland. Does it matter one whit when the ministers were informed? The Home Office was told, and as usual, did nothing. Is the problem really here the perpetually unfit for purpose Home Office?
Well, it would appear so, but there seems to be an awful lot of buck passing and nobody taking responsibility here. I mean, as you said at the beginning, Andrew, Legionella is a really, really harmful bacteria. It's usually found in shower heads, actually, or in pipes leading up to showers. I remember once when Some was found in the showers in the toilets in the Scottish Parliament, and they were shut for ages. But any responsible government surely would have made sure that all these health and safety checks were done and the results through to them before they started putting people on them. But because it's got such a high profile, this Stockholm barge, uh, and asylum seekers have got such a high profile because that's what the Tories want. They always want a bogeyman to be able to get people to vote Tory. They just pressed ahead and put them on anyway, and they'll be lucky if they've not got a death on their hands as a result of this. And, all the extra expense to the taxpayer to take these people back off and find other places for them. It's just a truly appalling, and we've said before, not fit for purpose department of government at Westminster.
Thanks, Maureen. Now, as John Drummond, I saw, pointed out over the weekend, the Westminster government has spent £140 million to send folks to Rwanda, and has spent £1.6 billion to put folks onto a prison hulk barge in Dorset. Yet, as we know, nobody's been sent to Rwanda, and there's now nobody on this prison hulk barge because of the finding Legionella on it. And of course, I'm reminded that even Priti Patel rejected the prison hulk barge idea because it was much too expensive in her mind. So is this rolling debacle this over the last 2 weeks, is it more evidence that a Tory Westminster government is all talk, all hot air, and it simply cannot deliver even its own basic policies?
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had that amount of money at your disposal. Surely a responsible government would be saying, well, let's look at our whole immigration policy and use that money to set up a proper immigration policy. Now, that might well be having UK officials based on France's northwest coast. Sorry, I beg your pardon. It doesn't have a northeast coast. But people who are gathering there to try and come across, but also a proper immigration policy where people can come to Britain legally and then be processed in the normal way, like any other decent country would do. But as I said, they want to use the boats and the migrants as something that they think will garner the right-wing support for the Tory party. But you see as many people welcoming people to the barge and giving them welcome packs than you do demonstrating. So I just wonder if the way they see things through their hugely right-wing, arrogant eyes are really what's happening on the ground in England.
Thanks, Maureen. Thank you. And I'm sure you and I will be discussing this topic again. But we'll move on now because the death toll from the Maui wildfires reached 96 today, the worst recorded in the US in more than 100 years. Officials said that the number of dead could continue to grow. Hundreds remain missing. Firefighters also continue to battle flare-ups as searches of the destroyed town of Lahaina continued. I do expect the numbers to rise, the governor of Hawaii, Josh Green, told reporters. Climate scientists say that such deadly wildfires will become more common as the climate crisis worsens. In Hawaii, the fire that swept into Lahaina last Tuesday was fueled by dry conditions and hurricane winds offshore. It destroyed nearly every building in the town of 13,000 souls, leaving a grid of grey rubble wedged between the blue ocean and the green mountain slopes. Authorities warned that toxic byproducts of the fire may remain, including in drinking water. Those whose homes were destroyed are to be housed in hotels and vacation rentals, officials said. With more than 2,200 structures damaged or destroyed and more than 2,100 acres burnt, the Federal Emergency Management Agency estimated the cost to rebuild Lahaina at $5.5 billion. Now, Maureen, Barack Obama has said that if all of us, the Ohana, which is Hawaiian for the family, if the Ohana pull together and do as much as we can to give back to an island and to a town and people who have given us so much, I'm absolutely confident that Lahaina and Maui and those families are going to be able to rebuild. Now, as it happens, I was in Ypres in Flanders a couple of weekends ago, and that's another city that was absolutely obliterated, and yet it was able to be quickly rebuilt after the First War. So, do you think, is there hope that the same reconstruction will be achieved for Lahaina and the people of Lahaina in Hawaii?
Well, I'm sure Obama, with his connections to Hawaii, and one part of his family came from there, didn't they? And I think he spent quite a lot of his childhood on Hawaii. Um, I think with those connections, Obama will be bending Biden's ear very strongly to make sure that millions of pounds of reconstruction money is sent to Hawaii. It must be very lucrative for the US economy in terms of tourism, and I think they deserve money to help with reconstruction. But it's an absolutely devastating thing to happen to a US state. I mean, it reminds you of the devastation of the flooding on the Mississippi, I think it was, when New Orleans was totally flooded. Do you remember that? And all the
Mm-hmm.
flood protection things broke, and it was just huge. I mean, I think this compares is the biggest since that devastation. And that reconstruction, I think, is still going on, and some people have not returned to their houses. But this is different when it's an island community, or, as Obama said, a family. So um, I mean, 1,000 people still missing. I mean, people were running into the sea to escape the fire. It must have just been a nightmare, absolutely horrific. Um, and I was just thinking, are there still climate deniers out there, and in the States as well? Because that's where a lot of the right wing are climate deniers. Unbelievable if they still are.
Absolutely right, Maureen, and you're correct as well. President Barack Obama was born in Honolulu, so Hawaii is very much home for him. But we'll look at the climate crisis from a European perspective with our next item now, because a critical railway bridge in Norway has collapsed into a river after a storm caused widespread damage to infrastructure. The middle part of the Rantcliffe Bridge in Ringabu, which is crossed by the Dovre line connecting Oslo and Trondheim, slid into the Lagan River this morning. It is the latest high-profile casualty of the storm named Hans, which swept through the southern part of Norway, causing record-high river levels, landslides and mass evacuations. The state-owned rail infrastructure company, Bane Nor, said it was investigating the extent of the damage to the 172-metre-long steel bridge that was built in 1957. The railway company said it does not know when the bridge, which was closed at the time for safety reasons during the storm, will reopen, and that damage has also occurred to other parts of the railway line. The track manager, Sigbjørn Korsgaard, said there is a danger of the bridge drifting further down. Said there is no danger of the bridge drifting further downriver, but we want to get it out of the water as quickly as possible to ensure the flow of water in the Lagan, and to be able to put a bridge back over the river in place. The old railway bridge next to it, which has been converted into a road bridge, has remained standing, but it will be closed for some time. Korsgaard said they were in the process of cordoning off the area, putting up fencing at 3 roads that lead to the bridge. Heavy showers were forecast in the area for Tuesday, making conditions even more challenging. Railway bridges in Norway undergo a general inspection every 6 years, the rail company said, adding that the Rantcliffe Bridge was last checked in 2019 and that in 2021 it was sandblasted and painted. Now, Maureen, from what I could see this afternoon as this story broke, nobody in Norway is demanding that the Norwegian Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, resign after this bridge was swept away by the huge floods. Now, I think it's fair to say that if the same thing happened in Scotland, we all know what the usual suspects would be demanding that the First Minister do. So, do you think looking at this more broadly, do we deserve the sort of politics which seeks to weaponise and trivialise every single thing that happens, but seem to be a particular feature of politics in Scotland at the moment?
Well, I doubt that it's the general public who are calling for that. It's the mainstream media, journalists and reporters who are furrowed to Westminster politics and to Labour or the Tory party, who just hate the fact that the SNP and devolved administration can do things differently and mostly better than is happening and coming out of Westminster. I mean, that is the reason for the hatred against the SNP in the mainstream media, because we are shown that we can do things better, and, as I say, differently and often quicker than is happening in the bureaucratic, cumbersome nature that is Whitehall politics. But as you said, this is another example of climate change. We've been talking about the effects of heat and hurricanes in Hawaii, and now we're talking about floods in Norway. And I was watching something that I hadn't seen on mainstream media, which was houses being washed down the river just outside the capital, Juneau, in Alaska, because of overblown rivers and flooding, taking away the trees, and then literally the houses falling into the rivers. So, as I said to end the last piece, Andrew, are there still climate deniers out there? And and on your other point about calling politicians to account, of course they should be held to account. But I'll never forget the time that poor Stuart Stevenson had to resign because a few people got stuck in the snow for a few hours or overnight on one of or a couple of Scotland's roads. I mean, in Norway, that is probably more common, but yeah, that was just a complete tornado of angst or anger whipped up by the mainstream media against the transport minister.
Thanks, Maureen. That's a very good point, and thank you for reminding us of the events that unfolded and the effect on Stuart Stevenson. But we'll move on now with a little bit more Scottish news, because proposals to introduce electronic tracking and monitoring technology for small fishing vessels will be consulted on as part of a package of new fisheries measures announced today. The consultation proposes that vessel tracking devices will be required by the Scottish commercial vessels under 12 metres in length, wherever they operate, and by all vessels of that size when they operate in Scottish waters. It also asks whether remote electronic monitoring systems, which are more sophisticated than vessel tracking, should be required in some inshore vessels. Rolling out technology across Scotland's fishing fleet would show that vessels are operating sustainably and within the law, increasing consumer confidence in Scottish seafood. They would also provide valuable data, which would help fisheries to be managed more sustainably and informing marine planning, benefiting Scotland's fishing industry and the marine environment. The Environment Minister, Gillian Martin MSP, who met with fishing industry representatives in Peterhead today, said, "Government, industry and communities all have a shared interest and commitment to a healthy marine environment. Open dialogue and constructive working of the sort that has helped to develop these proposals will ensure that we benefit from the expertise of the fishing industry. Cooperation and co-management will ensure that both Scotland's fishing industry and our marine environment can thrive sustainably." The Scottish Government also published the outcome of two consultations. Remote electronic monitoring will become mandatory on large pelagic vessels and all scallop dredge vessels in Scottish waters. Further rollout of the technology will be considered alongside the future catching policy development, and the future catching policy will take concrete action to increase the sustainability of fishing activity, supporting fishers to avoid catching fish and other sensitive marine species that they don't want to land or catch in the first place. These announcements represent the next steps in Scotland's fisheries management strategy, which has been developed in partnership with the fishing industry and other stakeholders. The package of measures within the strategy should help place Scotland in a leading international position to deliver sustainable fishing. So, Maureen, do you think are these consultations and the positive discussions taking place in Peterhead today, are they an indication that perhaps now the Scottish Government is going to be able to make perhaps more constructive headway with the industry and with voters who depend on the industry? For example, after the issues earlier this year with proposals for the highly protected marine areas, which have now been delayed.
Yeah, I think obviously the proposals for the HMPs has meant that the relationship with the fishing industry around the coast of Scotland has taken a knock, and that's a shame because the fishing industry and the government had been working pretty well, and the in fact, talking about Stuart Stevenson, I think it was when he was an agriculture minister that we saw, maybe I'm not recalling this properly, that we saw cameras and video recordings put on the vessels to monitor the catches. And the fishing industry themselves now do realise that management is really crucial. And of what the cause of the disagreements previously had been that they thought that the fishery protection vessels weren't monitoring the catches, monitoring the fish stocks in the right areas of the fishing grounds and that sort of thing. So if the monitoring is now done by the vessels themselves and with the cooperation of the vessels, then I think there can be less room for disagreement on how the quotas should be set in the future and things like that. And I think it's particularly good that we're seeing them now on the scallop dredging vessels, because the underwater films that I have seen of the Clyde estuary, for example, where there is no marine life on some parts of the Clyde estuary, is really welcome, and I think, as I say, if the monitoring can be done cooperatively, that's a great way to be going forward. So this is to be welcomed.
Thanks,
There will
Maureen.
still be
Now,
disagreement. There will still be
there will be.
disagreement,
There
but
will
at
be.
least we'll have the science.
Yes, yes, creative tension. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Maureen. Now, we'll come back to Glasgow for our final item this evening, because the public and transport operators are being praised for playing a pivotal role in delivering the successful Cycling World Championships for Scotland. Hundreds of millions of people around the world tuned in to see a series of cycling events across the country, which showcased our breathtaking scenery and stunning historic landmarks over the course of 10 days. Key highlights for the Clockwork Orange, the subway, were the first weekend when they saw 132,606 journeys, the busiest weekend overall since the current smart card ticketing system was installed more than 10 years ago. Saturday, the 12th of August, saw 59,207 passengers alone. That's the new busiest day since October 2018 and the second busiest day in the past 10 years. Speaking on a recent trip to the National Traffic Control Centre at South Queensferry last week, the Transport Minister, Fiona Hislop, said, "Scotland is now well established for delivering world-class events. This is the latest feather in our cap, following from the Commonwealth Games, the Ryder Cup, the Solheim Cup, the 2018 European Championships, COP26 and Operation Unicorn. The reason these events often run like clockwork is down to thorough planning, testing and partnership working. If these events didn't run well, we would know all about it very quickly, so it is encouraging that the events and complex arrangements have run so smoothly. Thank you," she said, "to all the partners and transport workers who have kept Scotland moving during these fantastic championships. I'm also grateful to local communities for their patience during local road closures in place." So, Maureen, Fiona Hislop listed a number of Scotland-level events, and I was struck that Glasgow, of course, has seen the Garden Festival, the City of Culture, the City of Architecture, the Champions League final in 2002, the Commonwealth Games in 2014, and which featured Team Scotland's best ever Games performance. And then in their slipstream came the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, and now the UCI Cycling World Championships in 2023. So with that long list of successes under Glasgow's belt now, what do you think Glasgow should aim for next?
The Olympics, perhaps. But it's absolutely great to see the way that people have been welcomed to Scotland from all over the world to watch this, and that Scots domiciled people themselves have gone out to see the events that have been going on. And the events, some of the events, as you say, have been in other parts of Scotland, and they've been hugely well attended as well. When something like mountain biking comes to your area, then of course, like the Borders and Peebles, then of course you're going to go out and watch it. So a hugely successful event, well run. But, before the event, we had the mainstream media yet again, saying that Glasgow's full of rats, at least there isn't a bin strike this time like there was it during the Commonwealth Games, I think, or whatever. They're always looking for something to denigrate Glasgow, even, the hugely world-leading Edinburgh Festival, they try to find something negative and derogatory to say about the organisers or the town and itself, and empty shops and things, which is a phenomenon happening in most of Western European cities. So, as you said, Andrew, hats off to those people who were organising this. Hats off to the City of Glasgow Council, SNP run, and the leader, Susan Aitken. And yes, I think, I suppose the future of the Commonwealth Games is a whole other story that might be discussed at some other point. But it may be that the UK has to host the Commonwealth, since it is the British Commonwealth. And I'm sure if asked and the money came from the UK government, then Glasgow and Scotland is well placed to be able to put it on again.
Thanks, Maureen. And I'm afraid that's all that we have time for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland depends on the generosity of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Right now, we have a pressing need to raise £30,000 to pay our bills and to ensure that we can continue making programmes. We're now £250 short of £11,000 so far, but we really need to raise the remaining £19,250 as soon as possible. To everyone who has donated and everyone who's signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you'd like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, and you can find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. We will be back at 7 o'clock sharp tomorrow evening for the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come back and join us then. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening, and of course I'd like to give a very special thanks to our very special guest, Maureen Watt. Thanks, Maureen.
You're welcome. Good to be with you.
On this day in 1888 in Helensburgh, John Logie Baird was born. In 2006, he was named as one of the 10 greatest Scottish scientists ever, which maybe tells you something about Scottish science and engineering. The first television picture he broadcast was, of course, the head of a dummy who was named Stookie Bill. I've been your Stookie Bill this evening. Please look after yourselves and have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.